Hey guys, welcome back to another Honkai Star Rail video. Now that the game has been officially released, I wanted to begin by making a complete beginner's guide for players who are just starting out. Obviously, like for any brand new game, everyone and their mother is making content like this, but if this is the first beginner's guide you're watching, then I'd like to say welcome, and I hope this is insightful to those who need it and entertaining to those who want it. What I'm going to be doing is giving you an overall understanding of the game's systems, mechanics, and gameplay, as well as offering a few tips and things you should be aware of, especially during the early stages of the game to maximize your experience. A few days ago, I made a video comparing various features between Genshin and Star Rail, so if you're an avid Genshin player, then I recommend you check out that video before watching this one so you can get up to speed, as the games are very similar in overall feel. One last thing that bears mentioning is that this video will give you a general overview of the game and what to know about it. I have plans to make more in-depth guides for every system in the coming days, but this should help get you acquainted with all the important stuff. With that said, let's not waste any more time and get right into it. Like any RPG, combat is a big aspect of Honkai Star Rail, and depending on if you're a fan of turn-based combat or not, this can make or break your impression of the game. Personally, I enjoy both real-time and turn-based action, so I'm perfectly fine with that. How it works is there's an overworld phase and a battle phase. While in the overworld, by making contact with an enemy either by walking into them, attacking them, or being attacked by them, the battle phase begins at neutral or with one side having a first strike advantage, not unlike how other RPGs allow first hits, such as Paper Mario. While in battle, you pilot a team of up to 4 characters versus the enemy team, and the way turn order is decided mainly comes down to each unit's speed stat. Fast units get to move first and occasionally be able to act multiple times before someone else does. When a player's turn starts, they get to choose between 3 commands: basic attack, skill, or ultimate. Basic attacks generate skill points which are consumed by using skills. You can hold up to a maximum of 5 at a time. To use a character's ultimate, you have to generate energy, which can be accumulated through a variety of ways, most of them pertaining to dealing damage. These ultimates can be activated during any one of your party members' turns, and do not constitute using up a turn. As for enemies, they have 2 combat stats of interest: their health bar behaving like a traditional health bar, and a toughness meter. The toughness meter can only be damaged by attacks of the elements that the enemy is weak to, indicated above them. If their toughness bar gets reduced to 0, they get inflicted with what is called a weakness break, causing them to take additional damage and a debuff based on the element of the attack that dealt the breaking shot. With this in mind, there are 7 elements in the game: physical, fire, ice, lightning, wind, quantum, and imaginary, and the weakness break for each one goes as follows. Physical, fire, lightning, and wind apply damage over time to a weakened enemy, while ice does the same as well as freeze them, locking them out of 1 or more turns. Quantum and imaginary are a bit different. The former pushes the enemy back in turn order while dealing quantum damage over time, while imaginary pushes the enemy back in turn order and lowers their speed. Broken enemies have to spend 1 turn or more recovering their toughness, so with proper timing you can cancel out an opponent's turn. Alongside the 7 elements, characters are divided into 7 different classes, known as paths. Destruction units are primarily focused on dealing damage overall, making them effective for general combat. Hunt units are single-target specialists, naturally excelling at fighting isolated targets such as bosses. Erudition units are the inverse, effective at clearing large clusters of enemies or waves of enemies. Harmony units are offensive and utility-oriented supports. They can augment their party members through buffs that increase damage, or even move them up in turn order to let them attack sooner. Nihility units are this game's debuffers, reducing enemy effectiveness to give your team an advantage. Preservation units are this game's tanks and defensive supports, which will no doubt be of great use in battles where you can expect to sustain heavy damage. And finally, abundance units are healers, self-explanatory. Supposedly, the game has more paths than just those 7, but currently there are no playable characters attached to them yet. These systems comprise Honkai Star Rail's combat system, placing great emphasis on party compositions, attack rotations, and game knowledge. Suffice to say, for all you Genshin players out there, a further degree of strategy is needed to clear this game's content efficiently, as opposed to Genshin where you can essentially brute force your way through everything. I definitely plan to make a more in-depth guide on proper team building since this game has a lot you have to think about. So, having established the game's combat, let's move on to the characters. Honkai Star Rail's character progression is almost identical to Genshin Impact's, but with a few modifications. Every character has a list of stats. HP, attack, defense, and speed are easy to understand. Crit rate and crit damage determine how often you critically strike and how much bonus damage you deal from each. Break effect measures the strength of a unit's weakness break and how long it takes for enemies to recover from it. Healing boost determines how much the character's healing abilities regenerate if applicable. Energy restoration is how fast they prime their ultimate ability. Effect hit rate and effect resistance determine how likely you are to apply status effects and debuffs to enemies, and how unlikely it is for the inverse. Elemental damage and res boost are the same but for elemental damage. Characters can progress through a number of ways. The first is obviously their level. The most efficient way to level up is to use character XP materials, which can be obtained by playing the game, farming for them, or buying them in the shop. Every so often, you'll reach their current level cap, requiring you to spend Ascension materials to continue leveling them further. Although bear in mind, you have to be a certain Trailblaze level, also known as account rank, or this game's equivalent of adventure rank for you Genshin players. Ascending a character also unlocks more traces. Traces make up Star Rail's skill tree. Just as you would spend materials to ascend a character, leveling up traces demands materials that can also be obtained through the same ways you would get character ascension and experience materials. Each character has 5 different types of traces: basic attack, skill, ultimate, talent, and technique. Leveling up the first 3 increases their effects in combat, while leveling up talent traces passively awards improvements to a unit's battling capabilities. Techniques, on the other hand, are overworld abilities. Some units have an offensive technique that makes their first strikes more deadly, others have supportive techniques. For example, you can have a technique that heals you out of combat, or a technique that makes you invisible to enemy detection. Moving on though, up next are Eidolons. Eidolons expand on a character's abilities by obtaining additional copies of them, so they're exactly identical to constellations in Genshin, or they're synonymous with limit breaks in other gacha games with a similar mechanic. Typically this entails pulling for multiple of them, and therefore necessitates premium currency. So those are all the character-centric stuff. Now let's go to their equipment, starting with light cones. Light cones are this game's weapons, each of them providing health, attack, defense, and a passive bonus. Light cones are also upgradable and ascendable in the same fashion as characters. Their passives can also be enhanced further by acquiring duplicate copies and superimposing them on top of one another. While they all appear to look the same visually, light cones can only be equipped by members of their corresponding paths. For instance, some light cones may only be equipable by Destruction Path units or Nihility units. It's important to choose the right weapon for every character, as one may make use of a light cone's passive more synergistically than another. The main way of getting more light cones, especially the better ones, is to pull them through Star Rail's gacha system, or buying them through the exchange. The other aspect of equipment are relics, which may look familiar to Genshin's artifact system. There are 6 types of relics: head, hands, body, feet, planar sphere, and link rope. Each relic comes with the main stat and up to 4 substats. On screen you can see the possible main stat for each type. As you upgrade a relic, you'll increase the main stat per level and periodically obtain a new substat if you have less than 4, or upgrading an existing one if you do have 4. The upgrades are entirely at random, so they're quite literally the same as Genshin's artifact system. Take that info any way you will. One more thing is that every relic belongs to a set, and by wearing other relics of that set, you can get additional bonuses on top of them. To get your hands on relics, you have to reach Trailblazer level 15 and get a decent way through the main story before you have access to them. Once you reach that point, chests and reward missions will give you a few, but you can farm them through Caverns of Corrosion. By spending Trailblaze power, Star Rail's version of resin from Genshin, you'll be awarded relics. They can also be acquired through weekly bosses and synthesis, aka crafting. Once more, I'll be making more in-depth guides in separate videos, such as a more detailed light cone and relics guide. While we're on content, I should go through the various game modes and dungeons you should be aware of throughout your journey. As you play through Star Rail, you'll encounter a number of dungeons that you can enter to farm resources and materials in exchange for Trailblaze power to progress your account. The different stages are Calyx, Stagnant Shadow, the aforementioned Cavern of Corrosion, and Echo of War. Calyx stages are responsible for giving you credits and XP materials used to level up your characters and light cones. Depending on the day of the week, Calyx stages give materials pertaining to a specific path. So for example, on Monday and Thursday you have Erudition and Harmony, Tuesday and Friday you have Hunt and Nihility, etc. Just like how materials for weapon and talent ascension differ based on the day of the week in Genshin. 10 trail power per Calyx run. Stagnant Shadows award character ascension materials in the same fashion, 30 trail power per run. Cavern of Corrosion hooks you up with relics and costs 40 power for one stage, pretty hefty. Echo of War on the other hand are your weekly bosses, offering relics, tracks of destiny which are traces upgrade materials. I'd imagine those are exactly the same as the weekly boss drops for talent level 7 and up in Genshin, and they also give light cones. You can attempt up to 3 Echo of War runs per week, but the cool thing is that you can do the same stage all 3 times, so if you're trying to focus on a specific unit, you're not stuck to just one per week. Very convenient. One stage is 30 power. Those stages make up all your bossing and farming needs. Now let's move on to the other 2 game modes. Forgotten Hall is a turn-sensitive dungeon where you have to defeat a group of enemies as quickly as possible, upon which you'll be awarded 0 to 3 stars depending on the number of turns. Forgotten Hall is Star Rail's equivalent of Genshin Spiral Abyss, basically endgame content. It even forces you to make 2 parties in later floors just like how Genshin does. The hall is divided into 2 parts, Memory and Memory of Chaos. Memory remains the same while Memory of Chaos resets every so often, where you can reattempt them for future rewards, and of course, they're naturally very difficult to clear. To access Forgotten Hall, you have to be Trailblazer rank 23 or higher, so it's not going to be available to you early on, and even then, you'll most likely need to get rank 30 or higher to take on endgame stuff. The same can't be said for the other game mode available, Simulated Universe, which is made accessible early on in the game. You can select a team of 4 characters to venture into a roguelike dungeon and get random buffs to enhance your team's power the further in you go. Simulated Universe will require its own video on account of there just being so much to talk about, but in terms of incentive, you can collect Stellar Jades and Herda Bonds. Herda Bonds can be exchanged for special items, and it's another thing you can do once you exhaust all your trail power. More activity is always nice. Now would be a good time to go over Stellar Jades. We haven't talked about the gacha system yet, so let's do that. Pulling in this game behaves exactly like Genshin. It's your primary source of units and light cones. Let's hope it's not the only source. Obtaining a 4 or 5 star unit or light cone gives you Undying Embers and Starlight, which you can then trade in at the Starlight Exchange for a variety of goodies. Here you can get credits, materials, experience, and a few other things for your convenience. Like most modern day gachas, Starrail will have a pity system, although at the time of recording this, the rates have not been made public. So unfortunately, I have no information on how generous or stringent the 5 stars are, but I'm praying it's not too bad. I think that about wraps up all the important systems, content, and features you want to make note of at the start of your adventure. In terms of overall progression, the game basically tells you what to do up until you complete the first area, Jarilo 6. So until that point, you should follow along with the main questline. From then on, I suggest you prioritize unlocking everything you possibly can. That includes all the game modes, opening up every dungeon access point, and advancing your Trailblazer rank. For all you Genshin players out there, progression through early game Star Rail is virtually the same as progression through early game Genshin. So if you remember what you had to do there, you can also do it here. Star Rail's main storyline is relatively gentle in terms of difficulty, so you won't have to concern yourself too much with properly gearing or leveling your teams until later on. You should also try to complete the Operation Briefing as quickly as you can. It's Star Rail's equivalent of the Adventure Handbook, all those beginner quests you have to do at the beginning of the game. Regarding what to do on a daily basis, here's a laundry list of things to handle. First and foremost, be sure to do your assignments once you get them. They're a consistent, albeit time-consuming way to passively generate resources. Seeing as how character progression in this game is identical to Genshin, I would focus on maxing out your units' levels and traces, so XP materials and credits are a good place to start. Next, you should use up your Trailblazer power doing the same thing. In the early game, focus on leveling up your characters and light cones. Next, you'll want to do your daily training missions, a series of random things you have to complete to get daily rewards. And there's a daily mission you can do on top of it that refreshes every day. That covers just about everything I wanted to go over. Obviously, there's a ton of more things to look into, but for a beginner's guide, that should give you a decent understanding of the game's foundation. Above all else, make sure to enjoy your time. I know because it's a new game, many players are trying to go crazy on like min-maxing and binging everything, but I do recommend you take your time and enjoy Star Rail. It's a really fun game, so be sure to savor it. Hopefully this was helpful to everyone. Be sure to stay tuned for more in-depth guide videos in the coming days. I know I'm more of a game discussion channel and not really a guide one, but don't worry, provided my Star Rail videos do well enough, you can expect my normal content style for Star Rail in the near future. The game just came out after all. It would be way too early to make a why no one plays. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Varsverim, join my Discord server, and once again, check out my Honkai Star Rail and Genshin comparison video if you haven't yet. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon in the next one. Take care.